Okay, party people, I am here to break down your Grayson Highlands 50 mile and 50K race route, and also the half marathon and 8 miler. Of course, kind of what to expect. So basically, I'm going to try to spend as little time as possible on each distance and kind of explain that to you. This is just kind of me as a trail and ultra runner. I've run over 300 ultra marathons. I've run all through the Grayson Highlands, every trail up there you could run many times. I love the area. So I designed this course, and it's an experience that I want everybody to have, from the 8 miler all the way up to the 50 miler. So heed my advice, also take it with a grain of salt. Okay, so we're gonna start with the 50-mile race. And again, I can't emphasize this enough. All of the information for all of our events is up on runbumtours.com under the races, Grayson Highlands. Specifically, there's a runner's handbook, there's maps, all that stuff like that. It's all been updated per our previous messages. Okay, so let's talk about the 50 mile. Every race, all of them start at the same place, which is at the visitor center, which you enter the park, drive all the way to the top. Okay. So actually, like, the last mile or so that you're driving up there is actually going to be, which is on the road, all paved. You actually end up coming down that for all of our races. So please be very, very aware when you're driving in. There'll be runners on that section of the road, as well as further down just past the kiosk, pay kiosk. There'll be other potential hazards of runners on the road. So please be cognizant. Okay. So our 50 miler, first of all, it's starting in the dark. You need a powerful headlamp, a very powerful headlamp. You're required to carry this with you at all times, even when it is daylight. Some of y'all, as we have drastically increased the finish time, so we've given you more of a larger cutoff, rather, to now 17 and a half hours. We want everybody to finish. Make sure you have that whole time. Best laid plans of mice and men often go awry. We know this. So make sure you have a really bright headlamp, and not, I recommend something more than 350 lumens. I love the Kogala Raw. I have no affiliation with them whatsoever. That's super bright, but you also have a big battery pack. I think for the first trail specifically, it is going to help you because it's very technical. So you'll be doing some more technical stuff in the dark. So the brighter the headlight you have, the easier it will be to navigate, easier it is to go quicker and not get hurt. That's the key there. So, on our Run Bum Races Facebook group, that's a great, great tool for everybody here to be able to ask questions. Hey, what headlamps do you guys use, et cetera, et cetera. Goes without saying, make sure you've got your batteries charged, you have extra batteries, or you've swapped out to new batteries if you do not have rechargeable. We are going to start by doing a loop around the parking lot to thin everybody out. Then you will go down the Listening Rock Trail. This is extremely technical, even in the daylight. Drop down about 400 or 500 feet. Then you kind of come all the way back up. History of this trail is really cool. Listening Rock, people with cattle, farmers with their cattle would go up there and listen for the bells of their cattle down in the valley below to try to locate them. That'll be dark. Then you'll come back up. It's like about a mile and a quarter trail, something like that. 500 feet down, 500 feet back up. So it's a pretty stout trail. It is beautiful. It's in the firs, in the birch, and the ash trees. You will come back onto the road that you drove up. You now have the easiest mileage on the entire race. You're going downhill for a little over a mile and a quarter, all downhill. And you will then jump onto a horse trail and then onto Cabin Creek Trail, which is a single track. Some of it's pretty technical along this Cabin Creek itself. You might have a view of the waterfall. It'll be dark. You'll hear rushing water. And eventually you make your way back to Massey Gap around mile 5. We'll have a water drop there. Okay. You've still done a considerable amount of elevation change, maybe a little under 1,000 feet of climbing at this point, 5 miles in. All right. From here, you will climb up for a quick, quarter mile or so up into the highlands, into the high country. And you'll be on a roadbed for a while. Then you'll get on a really janky, I think calling it a trail is kind of crazy, but basically from Massey Gap, you have a net climb from like 4,000 feet up to about 5,400 feet, which is our high point on top of the crest. Okay. Lots of technical trail through here. The whole thing is, as this trail is very technical in spots, you can only go as fast as you can. Pace is irrelevant. All right. So just kind of go by feel, perceived effort. Always err on the side of taking it slow, taking in food, taking in water, et cetera, et cetera. At 5,400 feet, depending on the weather, it could be whiteout, it could be snow, it could be rain, it could be hail, it could be a perfectly beautiful day with perfect temperatures. So just be prepared for everything in that high country. I cannot emphasize that enough, okay? The other thing I would say is once you hit the crest trail, it opens up into an old logging road. For quite some time, it is absolutely beautiful. God is beautiful. Hopefully a lot of you guys will get a sunrise or just thereafter up in that high country. That is why we start when we start. It's breathtaking. Hopefully the weather is perfect. From the top of that crest where you start on that road bed, you're basically 95% downhill all the way to our Fox Creek aid station, which again, if you've run this race before, there is no aid station in the scales any longer for any of our events. So you go down, you'll hit Fox Creek aid station about 16 miles in. Just make sure kind of early on, you're kind of watching yourself for bombing the downhills. You don't want to blow your legs out. You're taking walking breaks. You're being smart. Once you hit the scales, which is this wide open area about halfway down on that long, 6-7 mile downhill. Once you hit that scales area, it's wide open. You'll see where the scales are. From there, the road gets a little more technical. You'll eventually jump onto a double track horse trail. If it rains right before the race, it can be very muddy through this. Horse traffic kind of churns that up. We've had one year where it was really dry, another year where it was wet. So something to think of. You probably want some really grippy shoes. Once you hit Fox Creek aid station, you have rolling hills about 2 or 3 miles on a gravel road. It's a big loop too. So whatever you need for the next 12 miles, next 3 to 5 hours, make sure you have it with you. This loop isn't insanely hard. I give it a 6 out of 10 difficulty rating. The road's kind of just a give me. Again, even if it's runnable, recommending here that you're hiking early on and not getting your heart rate too high. Let's focus on eating, getting calories in for the second half of this race, okay? We have a water drop about 3 miles in once you go from gravel road to trail. From here, you'll have a longer gradual climb where you're kind of getting up on a ridge and it's kind of rolling and stuff like that. A lot of this also is horse trail. So some parts of it can be chopped up, eaten up, rocky, what have you. So it's pretty technical in spots, completely not technical in other spots. You'll be on this trail and part of the Iron Mountain Trail for a while. Eventually, after 3-4 miles of that ridge and climbing or whatever, you are going to basically get on the loop. You go around, and as you're going around, you're actually gaining altitude to the top, and then you drop all the way down and come back down the valley to the aid station. So once you take a left onto a Forest Service road and start headed downhill, it's 95% downhill all the way back to the aid station. It's actually very beautiful. It's a mix of maybe a quarter mile, half mile, mile of Forest Service road, and then back onto some nice single track going through the valley. Really beautiful. Again, all this stuff is super runnable. It's so easy to go too hard and too fast here through this section. So my recommendation, the Fox Creek Loop, really try to rein it in, focus on food, nutrition, pace. Don't get overheated. If it's hot, stay wet. Okay. Now, with that being said, once you get back to Fox Creek, it is probably one of our longer climbs. From the scales itself, you basically did a lollipop there. So you dropped way down, did a loop, and now are coming back up. So that horse trail you went up in the beginning, dropping down there off of the crest trail, you'll be going back up that. So another good time to focus on getting in nutrition and hydration because the majority of us are not running uphill. So make this a quick power hike. If you do find some sections here and there you can shuffle, that's cool too. Keep your heart rate low. Once you hit the scales, it levels out a lot and you'll have very runnable old road beds basically to our aid station. Okay, you also have a little creek crossing in there. Probably get your feet wet if you haven't already. Okay, let's see what else. Yeah, so once you hit our aid station, which is Seed Orchard Aid Station, there's like about a half mile, 3/4 of a mile out and back to the aid station. So you take a left, go out there, hit the aid station, come back, and then you start climbing uphill. And basically, once you hit Seed Orchard Aid Station, it's more or less 80% uphill for the next 5 miles. So plan accordingly. And then once you basically crest back out, you enter the park gates on a roadbed you've already been on. You'll kind of flatten out, and then it'll be all downhill, mainly all the way to the camp store. So for when you go from Seed Orchard Aid Station to Camp Store, it's like the first half is all uphill, second half is all downhill to the aid station. Okay. Once you hit Camp Store, which is where I believe we have drop bags, you also have those at Fox Creek. But once you hit that, you will then be dropping down a roadbed and take a right onto the very gnarly, beautiful Wilson Creek Trail. If it's been raining at all, you're running along this creek, there's lots of little waterfalls. That will be just gushing and awesome, okay? That trail eventually dumps out onto a roadbed, which is, again, this is one of the more runnable sections. It will be muddy and rocky though, okay? So there you go. Once that starts climbing again, you're basically climbing all the way to the finish. So do realize that. So this whole course is kind of like, a mix up of like up, down, technical, not technical. So it's like run what you're gonna run, or run what you can run, walk what you should walk. And anything that's like in between, you have to be the judge of that completely. So yeah. Let's see what else. Yeah, so once you hit Rock House Ridge, which you've been climbing for maybe a mile and a half now to get to Rock House Ridge aid station, it is a mother of a climb from there to the finish. We started at the highest point in the park. That's where you finish. So you go up there and finish. Yeah, and so you climb up on the road, which is really steep. You'll pass some really nice views, and then you will go up the road a little bit further on the main road. Again, watch for cars, and you take a left on the single track, which is Stamper's Branch. Just people hate this climb. It's because you're getting back up towards 5,000 feet. You're at the end of the race and you've been climbing for a while. It is very noticeable and a very tough climb, but it's like not even a mile. I believe it's like 3/4 of a mile, maybe a mile max. For the 50 miler, once you get back to the finish line, you do not have to do an additional loop on Twin Pinnacles, which we do for the 50K. So you will come directly to the finish line. So there you have it in a nutshell. So all right, 13 minutes in, let's talk about the 50K. 50K is pretty cool. Let me pull this up right now. Let's see. Grayson Highlands 50K. Just want to make sure I'm giving you the right route that we're doing. Okay, cool. So when we're starting off, guys, we're going to be starting, we're going to be starting off same place, except because there's way more people in the 50K, what we're doing. And in years past, the 50K has been more like 26, 27 miles. This will be a true 50K for sure this year. Has a lot more climbing, has a lot more views. So we're gonna start off by running directly down the road. We have over 300 people registered for the 50K, actually, I think 350. So we're gonna run down the road, down to Massey Gap, okay? And unlike the 50 miler, we're going to take a right on a very, very, very steep trail, Big Pinnacle Trail. If you are even halfway intelligent, you will not try to run this. If you are trying to run fast, you might you're going to try to run this. So good on you. It's a beast of a climb. It's really steep, very short. So you have maybe like 3/4 of a mile. No, that's wrong. It's probably about a 1/4 mile to a half mile of climbing. You gain the Twin Pinnacles Trail, and this kind of like the elevation is like a more gradual up. You'll pop up over Little Pinnacle, which is like a sick view. Hopefully you'll have like a really good view, that early morning. From there, you'll actually come back through like where our finish line is. and then we'll route you through the parking lot, and you will jump onto the Listening Rock Trail. Listening Rock Trail is 500 feet down, 500 feet up, more or less. It's beautiful, it's technical, it's gnarly. Go down this, but be careful. And then you have a climb coming out of there. Now, it is 100% runnable if you are a beast of a climber. If you're not, you should be walking this. So the gist of like that first 3-4 miles is there's actually way more elevation change than we did before. There's a mile or so to thin you out. So if you're a faster person, slower person, you're going to want to get up there. Okay. The other thing is you got that big climb out of Massey Gap back up to this finish line. Then you also have the start finish line. Then you also have a big down and then big up back on Listening Rock. Okay. So make sure you're pacing yourself correctly. Now you're going to pop back out on the road. You're going to do the same section you already went down before, except this time in Massey Gap, you go left on the road and you'll rejoin the rest of the course. You'll hit like a horse trail for maybe like a 2/10 of a mile before jumping onto Cabin Creek Trail. Cabin Creek Trail is awesome, single track. It's pretty technical at the bottom. You'll be climbing up some pretty wet trail. Typically you get your feet wet in this. It's not really because there's like a water crossing. It's just because it kind of stays saturated. You'll climb up out of that. You'll probably, because it's daylight, you'll be able to see Cabin Creek Falls, and you'll come into Massey Gap around 7.5 miles. Now, this is our first aid station, but it's not an aid station. It is a water drop. So there's just water there. And you've done a considerable amount of elevation change into that point. So whatever you need to get you through to our first aid station, which is mile 15 or so, you need to bring it with you. Gels, food, whatever it might be, make sure you have that, because you'll be pretty hungry out there if you're not. There's just nowhere to get an aid station up there really besides that. So so you'll hit that mile 7.5. There's also crew access there. It's from there. You are then going to climb up about a 1/4 mile up into the highlands, the high country, and you'll be on like a roadbed for another 1/4 mile, and then you'll go through a gate that leaves the park. You're essentially now doing a loop, or should I say a lollipop with a small stick, to get back to that point. Okay. So from here, from that gate, you're going to climb a good while. It's going to be very technical as you're on Rhododendron Gap Trail. It's very technical, very beautiful. Look around, take photos, go slow. Probably not going to be running this. If you're not an uphill runner, you need to be hiking this. This will take us to our high point, about 5,400 feet, which is awesome. The view here is incredible. You'll know you're kind of done with that climbing when you take a right onto the Crest Trail, which is like an old roadbed. It's fairly obvious. You'll crest out, and then once you start seeing like epic views off that side where you cross the AT, it's like pretty much all downhill to our aid station, the Seed Orchard aid station. It's not all. There's a lot of flat and a lot of running, but this is like arguably, like for the 50K, definitely like the most runnable section of the whole 50K. But that could hurt you because you're only like, you're like 9 miles in. So like 9 to 15 are going to be very, very easy miles. So make sure you are pacing yourself correctly. You're mixing in, you're walking, you're eating, you're taking care of yourself, et cetera, et cetera. Again, as I said on the 50-mile video is, this could be very crazy weather when you're in the high country. It could be sideways rain. It could be completely whiteout conditions. It could be snowing. It could be snowing and whiteout conditions. It could be blowing 50 miles an hour plus. I mean, there's just all sorts of scenarios up there. It's the highest area anywhere around. So weather kind of just does what it wants with this area. And don't let it do that to you. So make sure you're looking at the weather ahead of time, and we'll try to put something out there. But at the end of the day, I'm not a meteorologist, so we'll do the best we can to give you places to go get the potential weather, but you've got to be responsible for yourself 100%. So don't be stupid. And then you'll get to the Seed Orchard aid station. This year there is no Scales aid station. I can't emphasize that enough. So if you run this before, the aid station is not where you think it is. It's like 2 or 3 miles past that. So again, very important that you have all of the stuff that you need with you. for the entirety of that first 15 miles, which could take you up to 6 hours. I don't know. It depends on your, how good you are. I forget what the cutoff time is, but you need to be moving. So, with that being said, once you hit the Seed Orchard aid station, you will retrace your steps slightly, about 3/4 of a mile, and then just continue straight. What does that mean? Doesn't mean anything. Just follow everything, signs, flagging, etc., etc. With that being said, once you leave that aid station, you're going to be net climbing for the next 4.5 or so miles, plus or minus, and then you'll pop back through the gate at the park. Once you hit there, you're basically 3.25 miles. So, again, I'm guesstimating, but from that point, it's all flat and down for like 95% of that to our camp store aid station, which has crew access, bathrooms, etc. Okay, from there, and now so a lot of this, you're on the same course as the 50 milers. So you might see 50 milers coming in, you might see them, they might come from behind you, you might catch up to them, depending on how fast, slow, etc. you are. So don't be put off by that. It's fine. You guys are all on the same route. So yeah, the 50 miler just diverts in the scales about where our old aid station was. So we'll have signs and stuff like that. So make sure you're paying attention to all of that. So once you hit the camp store and you leave, you're gonna go about half a mile, 3/4 of a mile downhill on a gravel road and turn right onto the Wilson Creek Trail. This is really gnarly trail. It's super technical for a little bit, and it's only like a mile and a quarter long, but you're gonna be going up, down, really rocky. Just be careful. It's a tough section. Then it pops you out on old road beds. This is actually one of the faster sections. It'll probably be wet. You probably get your feet wet. I'm sure at this point they've already gotten wet. We have a couple creek crossings early on. Cabin Creek is always wet. Just depends, unless it's just been super dry and you guys are really lucky. So you never know. With that being said, you got a flat rolling hills, kind of like a couple miles. Then you will start climbing up. Once you start climbing up and take a left onto the Rock House Ridge Trail, single track, it's not a net climb. It's all uphill until you get to our Rock House Ridge aid station. And really from that point, it's all uphill basically to the finish. So once you're coming uphill, you will be going, once you're going uphill to the aid station, you'll leave there, you go uphill on a road. Once you're going uphill on the road, you're going to have a pretty steep climb on the road. Then you're gonna take a right on the main road, still climbing, watch out for cars. And then once you take a left on single track on Stamper's Branch, it's like a Yellow Blaze Trail, this is a very steep climb. Everybody always talks about how awful it is. I can tell you it's just because it's steeper than anything else you've been climbing, and it's at the very end of the race, and you're almost at 5,000 feet doing this climb as well. Most of us don't live at altitude. So there you go. Then the cruelest thing ever, but also my favorite trail, you will be doing the Twin Pinnacles loop at the very end, okay? So what happens is you come by the finish, you take a right, you go out on the Twin Pinnacles loop, which you did half of that at the beginning of the race, and you finish. So once you hit it's about 2.25 miles from the finish line back around to actually finish. Make sure you take some photos in here, enjoy it. There's not a ton of climbing, but it's definitely not flat. So first half of the loop is a net down. The second half of the loop, once you take the left, is a net uphill to the viewpoint, and then it's down to the finish. So it's a lot of extra stuff in there. It's a lot of technical trails. Highly recommend stuff that has lots of grip on it. You will not, definitely will not regret having that. So yeah, so we're 25 almost minutes in. Let's talk about the half marathon. The half marathon starts by running down the road, for a first mile and a quarter. Faster people get up front. Everyone always blows themselves up going way too fast downhill. So if you're somebody who's not familiar with the course, is not a mountain runner, does road runs, hasn't run this far, I suggest going very slow and taking it easy. We after a mile and a quarter, we turn onto like a double track gravel path for maybe like a quarter mile. Then we take a left onto Cabin Creek Trail, which is some gnarly single track. You probably get your feet wet. Okay. There's not like there's water crossings, not really. It's just like the trail sometimes is saturated. Beautiful trail, and it's really gnarly technical. I think there's a couple sections where you actually have to be on all fours. You'll be fine. Yeah, and you get a really cool view of like Cabin Creek waterfall, Cabin Creek Falls, and then you take that will take you back into Massey Gap where you pop out of the woods, and from there you're gonna climb now for like a quarter mile. So a lot of the stuff, like when you're climbing here, it's like if you're not used to running uphill, don't, just walk. Like there's nothing wrong with walking. We're here to have fun. I hope there'll be ponies out. There typically are. In this next section, you go through a gate, you do a quarter mile climb, you get to an open area, and it's now like an out and back on an old dirt roadbed, a logging roadbed from way back when. This is when you're most likely gonna see ponies, okay? Be on the lookout. They'll be to your right and left. Typically, I'll go up there and kind of take photos and kind of try to entice the ponies to come say, hey. Just be aware, these are wild animals. You're not supposed to touch them, pet them, give them food, etc., etc. People have been bitten and injured, so just don't do that. I know everybody wants to ride them. You can't ride them either. But yeah, so you'll head out and back to the park boundary, which is flat. In that open area up there, about a half mile out, half mile back. And then you're gonna drop down for basically the next mile and a half, 2 miles, all the way to our one aid station that we have, our camp store aid station. You're only like 5.5 miles in. You're just gonna have water and Gatorade, that kind of stuff. So if you need anything else, bring it with you. From here, you're still gonna continue down a downhill. You're gonna start off like maybe another half mile downhill on a gravel roadbed, and then you will end up taking a right onto Wilson Creek Trail. This is gnarly trail, gnarly trail, very technical. You might have to kind of down climb some stuff. Just watch your footing. You shouldn't be blazing through here unless you really know what you're doing. This is where you get really hurt. It's also beautiful. There's lots of waterfalls, etc. That pops you out after a mile, pops you out onto a dirt roadbed that is very technical, lots of rocks, old logging road from way back when. You probably get your feet wet here if they haven't already gotten wet. This is a quicker section. Again, if you can run a rocky roadbed. If not, then you'll be going much slower here. Once the trail starts climbing, like starts going uphill, and it's not rolling hills, you'll see once it starts going uphill, it will be uphill all the way to the finish. So if you're smart and you've paced yourself, you're prepped for a really hard, long climb for the last like 3.5 miles of the race. We start on at the top of the park, and we've got to get back there. So you'll hit single track on the Rock House Ridge Trail, which is beautiful, which is a net rolling uphill to the aid station. You hit the aid station, do a serious road climb for about 1.5 miles, and then you take a left and go on an even steeper single track trail all the way up to the finish line, where you finish right there. There's no loop at the end. It's somewhere around 13 to 14.5 miles, 12 to 14.5 miles. I have no idea. I'm selling an experience, not a specific distance. This is not a road race. You will, if you're not hitting the Stairmaster, if you're not doing climbing and downhill, you will severely, you're going to hurt a lot from doing this. So keep in mind that a lot of the race you're running is basically at 5,000 feet. That's a high altitude race. So you're going to be going considerably slower. Stop, take the time, take photos. We've given you guys a pretty big cutoff time because we want everybody to have time to be able to take photos and enjoy it. Okay, 8 miler. Basically, you're starting with the half marathon. You're running the first. Basically, you're running all the way back to Massey Gap, which is basically running the first like 4 miles together, and then we pop you back out in Massey Gap, and you run across the road. This makes no sense. Like, you don't have to navigate. This will all be marked and all this stuff like that. No worries. But then you have like a pretty serious climb to the finish. So basically everything that I said for the half marathon up until when it was downhill for 2 miles to the Camp Store aid station. At this point, you basically go downhill maybe 100 feet, pop through a gate, run across a grass field, and then you take up the Big Pinnacles Trail, which is not really runnable for 90% of people, and it is very steep. You'll also jump onto the Twin Pinnacles Trail, so you get some really, yes, it's a hard climb to the finish, but you get some really beautiful views at the finish of this. The highest point in Grayson Highlands State Park, which is Little Pinnacle at like 5,100 feet or so. So it's definitely not an easy run by any means. My guess is if I was all out racing this 8-mile race, my goal would be to break an hour. So that's probably like a more elite time. Most people are going to take 2.5 hours to do this, maybe an hour and a half, 2.5 hours. So pace yourself accordingly. If you're walking the whole time, you'll obviously take more than that. So without further ado, I just want to say thank y'all for running. And Jade the Party Wiener says, good luck.